There is a Greek proverb, "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in." What are the greatest examples of this in human history?
Most of Jimmy Carter's actions.
The civil rights movement. MLK knew he wouldn't be alive to see integration.
True. It's clear he knew this and nonetheless persisted. The day before he was assassinated, he gave his "I've been to the mountaintop" speech and said, "But I want you to know tonight, that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the."
Susan B. Anthony spent her entire life trying to get women the vote. She was fined for attempting to vote, and spent years organizing people to fight for the cause. She died in 1906, a decade before the 19th Amendment was ratified.
In a very literal sense, the landscape gardens of Capability Brown. He carefully crafted these gardens, directing the planting of trees and bushes to create a beautiful vista, where it would take decades for the plants to actually grow to fulfill his vision.
The giant cathedrals in Europe like Notre Dame would take over 100 years to build. So the person who started building it would work their whole life on it and know they wouldn't be alive to see it complete.
I'm more interested to know when and why so many old people stopped planting and caring about the trees to begin with. It's not as shady these days as the shade they enjoyed in their youth from there. Y'all know I'm not really talking about trees, right?
Blows my mind how he knew. It's the most powerful speech I've ever seen. The amount of emotion conveyed in his words hits me every time I see it. I don't believe in but he really makes me believe he saw that promised land. Makes me believe we can get there as a people, if not as individuals.
Norway's sovereign wealth fund. That generation could have taken a selfish view and just taken the cash, or politicians just gone on a vote-buying spree. But it's independently invested and managed for the benefit of future generations.
The "you I got mine" sentiment seems to have always been there but became more prevalent post-WW2. Not sure why exactly, but I blame boomers and their parents.
Bridges. You didn't do anything to earn that bridge. You didn't ask for it, pay for it, or build it yourself. You came into existence with a convenient way to cross natural barriers that would otherwise be massive detours to travel.
Mendel discovered, literally, the seeds of the hereditary system in the mid-19th century, but if I recall well, nobody took it seriously until the early 20th century, like 30 years after his death.
The old Japanese people who volunteered to clean up nuclear waste sites from the World War II bombings. They knew that they likely wouldn't live long enough to suffer the worst of the effects of radiation, so they did it to protect younger people from experiencing it and to clean up Japan for future generations. It's really heartwarming.
Public infrastructure. People got to live to see the opening of one rail line or bridge, or several, but the integrated network of public infrastructure, that took 100 years to grow and is still growing.
Any scientific research that seems like a total waste of time and money right now, like the space race, medicines, nuclear fusion, some people might say we should just focus on improving morality and social justice. Which is important, don't get me wrong. But let's be real. Humans are dumb as rocks. And we're always things up. So, I'm hoping that eventually we'll come up with some quick fixes that keep us from wiping ourselves out as a species.
They did the same thing after Fukushima. I'm old and will die before the radioactivity kills me, so I will go rescue.
The UK could have done the same too, but spent it instead on tax cuts for the wealthy and financing millions of unemployed.
Australia and our mines. So much money given to billionaires, to keep our jobs.
Nye Bevan created the NHS in 1948, died in 1960. Absolute legend. Sadly, his legacy has been slashed to tatters and continues to take damage.
I have recently been to Cologne's cathedral. They started building it in 1248. They stopped unfinished in 1560. Then halfway through the 1800s they started building it again, finishing it in 1880. Not only the original builders would not see it finished, but neither would their grandchildren.
I think you meant Sophie B. Hawkins.
Just for those who weren't there at the time, Thatcher deliberately made those people unemployed by killing entire industrial sectors off with no thought of what would replace them. Trying to be balanced, generous, there may be an element of, oh look,
trees simply appear all by themselves because I've not seen anyone plant any, so I'll just assume they will grow for the next generation too.
The FBI was actively trying to neutralize him. He knew he had a target on his back. That said, I don't know that he knew it was that.
The Cassini family map, a first-of-its-kind map of France. It took 4 generations of family members and 6 decades to complete. Imagine being that second family member. Your whole life your father works on this map, only for you to work your whole life on it while raising your son. To do the same, and it takes a whole nother life for it to be completed.
I had that sense awakened when I visited La Sagrada Familia a few years ago. We hope to return there when it is actually completed, but to see the massive effort over several generations to see an idea through was part of the amazing experience there.
Not just billionaires, multinational companies receive huge tax subsidies to keep operating. Seriously, if they're not competitive without subsidies, then let them fail and nationalize the fallout.
I think I will organize a dance.
King Afonso III of Portugal started the plantation of pine in Leiria in the 13th century, which is now known as the Pinal de Leiria, with the intent of stopping the advancement of sand dunes. It was then expanded to its current size by King Diniz between 1279 and 1325. And it's said that every time they cut trees, they would plant some more, so it would never this great role in stopping the dunes, and thus protecting the agricultural areas. The Pinal de Leiria is most known for supplying the wood used in the ships during the Portuguese discovery period, which ushered the country into its greatest period of may have not been planted with that objective, but the kings that did it over many decades, did it knowing that they wouldn't get many benefits in their lifetime, and it coincidentally ended up being of great importance centuries in 2017, 86% of it was burned down in forest fires, and because our government is incompetent, it is basically all destroyed still, with less than 50% of the burned area being replanted, and most of it being replanted by the normal plant growth that happens, not by any government action.
That's not a Greek proverb. It's the invention of a 20th century Quaker writer, whose creation was appropriated in the 1990s by politicians in the United States, added the byline, Greek proverb, to make themselves seem more intelligent.
In Canada we had a province that came so close to setting themselves up like Norway, but then they looted it for lower taxes. It's kinda sad.
It's great that they did that. Especially because after I read this question I immediately thought of the firefighters in Chernobyl. They went into the reactor to prevent the disaster from escalating further, saving lives. They probably didn't know their heroic act would cut their life short.
He resigned after modest fees for dental services were introduced. I can hardly imagine how angry he would be at the current state of the NHS.
I am fairly certain that the Chernobyl heroes would have known that diving into a nuclear reactor for a while would them, but did so nonetheless. They did a great service to humanity at the cost of their lives.
If there is an afterlife, she definitely feels the appreciation of society still. Her grave is constantly visited and decorated with, "I voted," stickers.
Joseph Bazalgette was a Victorian engineer who masterminded London's modern sewer system in the 1860s. He foresaw the insane population growth, and when all the calculations were made on how big to bore the pipes underground, he essentially said, "Nah, let's double it." Now, infrastructure that would have been unable to cope in the 1960s is still in use today.
Mabel Ping Wali was a suffragette. But because she was not a U.S. citizen, she knew that even if she succeeded she would still not be able to vote. During the Napoleonic Wars there was a Royal Navy admiral who when on leave used to wander his country estate planting oak trees to provide timber for the Navy. It's estimated they are about ready now.
They definitely knew. There are accounts of them discussing exposure and how long they could stay in before dying.
I just visited the museum at the hotel where he was shot. If you read anything about the civil rights movement or just being black in the South, back then it's pretty obvious that everyone in that movement was walking around with a target on their back, all the number of beatings and murders the civil rights movement were subjected to is just mind-blowing. And you know there's so many more that are lost to history, were never reported.